5 Live Formula One.
Hello and welcome to the Chequered Flag podcast. I'm Jenny Gow. Alongside me is Harry Benjamin and former F1 mechanic Mark Priestley. It might not have been the most interesting Monaco Grand Prix, but hopefully the next few minutes will entertain you, dazzle you, and make up for whatever lacked in the F1. Harry, you've got a
Just a few minutes then.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, 3 to 4, that'll do.
You got a message though, didn't you? Telling us how to do this podcast.
Oh my god! Yeah, someone was doing our running order essentially for us before the race even ended. So big crash at the start. Lots that brought out a red flag. Everyone could change their tyres for free. Should we talk about the rules on that? A few lines on that. Alpine had a crash upset between Gasly and Ocon. Let's catch our flight.
So who sent you the message?
It was Neil on Twitter.
So
#
producer
BBC F1.
Joe. You've got some competition. So they've told us how we should do this, and I think we should do it.
It's a decent running order, really.
Do you reckon? Okay, let's do that. So the race started, Leclerc on pole, and he's done it before, he's been there before, but this time he had to convert it and go for the win.
Well, he'll have been well aware of people talking about the curse of Monaco for Charles Leclerc, and today he managed to put that to bed. So this is a dream win for him, isn't it? Because he grew up around this place. He's born and bred around here. It's a very special venue for everybody, but particularly for him. And yeah, you're right. It was on pole. A lot of the work to get today's win was done yesterday in qualifying. Today he just had to finish the job, but he did it very, very well.
And you know what? Yes, 90% of the job is done in qualifying, but I don't know about you, Mark, but obviously the emotion of that win from Leclerc, he really managed his pace all throughout the weekend. It was a real intelligent drive. He wasn't only just outright faster than everybody, but he knew when to be fast and knew when he didn't need to put 100% in, because the walls are there waiting for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crying out to make a mistake around here. There's plenty of opportunities to get it wrong, and he managed to not do that. I think, look, we know he had way more pace in hand in that car, but that was the point. That's what put him in the position, getting pole position yesterday. He was the fastest. He was the most comfortable in his car all weekend, right from the very first laps of practice. Yesterday, he didn't need the outright pace. He did need his accuracy, he did need his patience, his calmness, the experience that he's got over the years, and he didn't put a foot wrong. He made his car very wide, he controlled the pace absolutely perfectly. Yes, it was slow, but he did everything he needed to do to get all the way through a very long stint on that hard tyre, and that's what won him the race.
Question to the group.
Oh.
Is this the turning of the tide? Are we now expecting to see Ferrari, Charles Leclerc up there battling consistently? Red Bull and Verstappen had an off weekend, but they had an off weekend in Imola as well. Verstappen, okay, put it on pole and won, but there were some circumstances around that. It was only 7/10 across the line between Verstappen and Norris come the end of the race in Imola. McLaren, Piastri was right there with Leclerc the entire time, and everybody was managing their pace. I think back to the start of the year, we were all bracing ourselves, getting ready for, here we go, it's going to be 24 Max Verstappen wins. I think this could be the turning of quite an exciting Formula One season now.
Am I deluding myself? I don't want to go all Andrew Benson on you. Yeah, I don't want to get too Andrew Benson here and be the voice of reason. But yes, things are getting closer because Ferrari brought upgrades, McLaren have brought upgrades, and it's definitely closed that gap at the front. But this is a very specific circuit, Monaco, isn't it? We know that Red Bull car has very few weaknesses, but one of those weaknesses are the very tight and twisty street circuits. We see them struggle at Singapore. We've seen it again here. It's specific to the way that car is designed in terms of how it creates its downforce. It's very stiffly sprung, run very low to the ground. Cars don't like to run around bumpy street circuits like Monaco with big curbs when that's inherently baked into the design. So that was their weak point. I'm not sure it's going to be the same as the season rolls on.
But speaking to Max after qualifying, he did hint that this might be the same in Canada because that's quite curvy and bumpy. There are other street circuits in the calendar that will be a challenge if they can't get on top of it. But as you say, there are a lot of circuits out there that will suit the Red Bull. So surely both McLaren and Ferrari need to make hay while the sun shines.
It's going to be from now until the end of the season and rolling through into 2025 because we've got a stable set of rules, not too much in the way of technical changes until that big one coming in 26. So for the next 18 months or so, it's a real development race. You know, we've seen big gains from McLaren. We've seen gains from Ferrari as well. Red Bull need to now join that development race because it looks at the start of the season like they might have it very, very easy. It definitely isn't going to be that easy. They are going to have to fight for this as well. And I think as fans, we're all in a pretty good position with that.
Well, the finishing order was Leclerc, Piastri and Sainz. They made up the podium. We'll come back to those three. But then it was Norris, Russell, Verstappen, Hamilton, Tsunoda, Albon, Gasly. And then outside the top 10 was Alonso, Ricciardo, I can't read my own handwriting, Bottas. It must be Bottas, Stroll, Sargent and Zhou. And 4 non-finishers, which were Ocon, Hülkenberg, Perez and Magnussen. And let's go back to the beginning of this race, because it had to be restarted. There was a red flag, and Charles Leclerc had to do that twice, had to take that pole and go out there and make sure he stayed ahead of everyone else around him. And he did that well.
And yet producer Paddy was telling me off for doing eyes to the lights, foot to the floor twice in the
well,
race.
Well, I know we all have our own split opinion on that, but you're standing by it.
Leclerc had to do 2 race starts, so did I. Simple as. The pressure's on for both of us. But Leclerc managed.
Who was under more pressure, you or Leclerc?
When you've got Andrew Benson sat next to you, you feel the pressure constantly. No, you're absolutely right. He had to do the job twice, and that is the best chance Oscar Piastri had, who started alongside him, of finding a way through to take the lead. And Leclerc nailed it twice. All the pressure, the Monaco curse, 3 pole positions here, including the one this weekend, never even standing on the podium for Charles Leclerc. And the emotion for him as well to race not only on the streets that he calls home, because he is Monegasque. Yes, pretty much every driver lives in Monaco, but he is actually born and raised in Monaco. So the emotion, the pressure that he was feeling to do that, and also the storyline, you know, his father passed away a few years ago, his mother works in Monaco still, and to get that win, to put Ferrari back on the top step in Monaco, it's a lovely story. And let's remember that Leclerc hasn't actually been the quicker Ferrari driver in the first part of this 8 races that we've had already. Sainz was ahead of him, and Leclerc refocused and put more priority into developing with the car this year, and that's showing right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think the tide has swung a little bit. Of course, between the 2 Ferrari drivers, we've got one of them that is fighting for his sort of career at this point, in terms of he's been hoofed out of that team in place of Lewis Hamilton turning up in 2025. So he's got to put himself on show for everybody else who has a seat to offer. I actually thought Carlos Sainz, he didn't qualify as well because he was never quite as quick, but I thought he drove a really strong race today. It was a really intelligent race. He got into the strategy side of things himself, almost talking his own team through what he should be doing in terms of managing gaps. It's amazing they have that capacity to be able to look around themselves. Maybe at the pace they were going, they could have been reading a newspaper, but they had enough capacity to be able to think about the strategy of the cars behind him, and I think it worked really well for him. That's what got him that podium.
About the start, it wasn't quite so simple, and we lost a few cars and had to do the restart. Just talk us through the events that happened and unfolded.
Big crash, essentially, on the initial start. The run down to Saint-Devote, Charles Leclerc got away well, Piastri alongside. Actually, Piastri was being troubled by Carlos Sainz, and the other Ferrari into turn 1, the right hand of Saint-Devote. They actually did make a bit of contact, but that wasn't the contact that ended up with the red flag, as they then go up the hill. It slightly curves and snakes all the way up through Massenet into Casino Square, and on that run up the hill, further back in the pack, Sergio Perez's right rear made contact with the front left of the Kevin Magnussen Haas. That speared both of them into the wall, and unfortunately Nico Hülkenberg then got biffed on the rear by Perez spinning his Red Bull sideways, and the Red Bull took a huge amount of damage. All wheels were off that car, every corner was off that car. All that was left was the monocoque. It was a huge shunt. All 3 of them walked away, a testament to the safety of Formula One, but also questions over Magnussen going for a gap that was always going to close. So that was what brought out the red flag. But then at the same time, just round the corner at Casino Square, Carlos Sainz then, on the face of it, starts locking up and goes straight on when you should start arcing right. He goes straight on. ultimately that ended up being a puncture for that contact with Piastri through Sandoval. So there was a little bit of drama in action, but the red flag came out for the Perez and Haas incident. Everyone out and okay, but that was the reason for a huge amount of mess having to be cleaned up by the marshals.
Do you know what? That Perez incident in that Red Bull, I mean, the car was utterly destroyed, it looks like. There were shards of fiberglass everywhere. To me, it looked like it had gone through one of those car squashers, and it was just compacted and sent to the bin.
It was about half
to be
the
seen
size,
again.
wasn't it? Yeah, it was about half the size when it finished, and a huge clear-up job for the marshals. I mean, obviously,
was a bit shaken by it, Perez.
Yeah. Understandably, it was a high. You know, Monaco's not a high-speed circuit, but that is the high-speed section, and he was flat out up that hill when it happened. So it was a fairly big impact. When you see the onboard, I mean, the sound of the onboard was just terrifying.
Yeah.
So I'm pleased they all walked away. But yeah, you're right. What happened was, and what was really crucial for Carlos Sainz, because he had that puncture after the contact with Oscar Piastri. You think at that point his race is over and it's all, the end of the weekend for him. Seconds later, that big crash with Perez happens. Red flags come out, and crucially, the red flags came out a few metres before the end of the first timing sector. And because of that, because they hadn't crossed that first timing sector, when they got to the restart, they reshuffled the cars back into their original order. If it had been a few metres later, officially the race has started, and what they would have done is restarted the race from the existing order.
Is that fair enough, do you think?
Well, it's the rules, and it's a massive amount of luck on the part of Carlos Sainz, isn't it? But, some days it goes your way, some days it doesn't. You can argue that rule is right or wrong as long as you like, but they have to have something in place to determine a line by which the next set of rules kick in and apply. It was his day today, and, he made it count after that, after getting the stroke of luck. Lining up on the grid again in third for the restart, he managed to keep that position to get the podium.
Well, let's hear from our race winner. It is Charles Leclerc.
Charles, congratulations. It's the race you've always wanted to win. You've done it for yourself, you've done it for your dad, you've done it for Jules. Just tell me how you feel right now.
I feel extremely good. I think there's a lot of things adding to this weekend. First of all, it's my home Grand Prix. Second, I've had two opportunities in the past that I've lost, which things that weren't really in my control, and that was extremely difficult to manage those very difficult moments. And also, you don't really know whether you are going to get another opportunity to win this race, and it's such a difficult race to win that you don't know. And I knew there was an opportunity this weekend. And then last, it's my home race. It's the race that made me dream of becoming a Formula 1 driver one day. It's the race that I used to watch with my dad that has done absolutely everything for me to get to where I am today. Our dream was to race here in Monaco in Formula 1. I wouldn't have imagined when I was younger that I would race with Ferrari one day in Monaco and win this race. And that was obviously the ultimate dream, right before being world champion, of course, but the ultimate dream. And the fact that I managed to do that, I feel like I did not only accomplish my own dream, but also the one of my father, the one of my mother as well, that has sustained me in everything I have done since then, and that has been an incredibly strong woman when we all lost my dad. My brothers that have always been so supportive with me, my girlfriend, all my family, all my friends. And the special thing about this race is that it's such a small country that I've got everybody here. And everybody was around the track, and exit of turn one, I had my best friends. In the pits, I had my family. And everywhere on the track, I had friends. And that makes it so incredibly special. So it's a very, very special moment. I did not expect the race to be so difficult to manage emotionally and mentally wise. I had so many thoughts of the people I have mentioned already in the last 10 laps. And that was very difficult to manage, because even though I knew the pace was extremely good, you have to stay on it on a track like this, and it was very, very difficult.
So was it just a bit of a release then in that moment when you crossed the line, then you embraced your mechanics, then you stood on the podium that you'd always wanted to stand on?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. It was definitely a very, very special moment, a moment I will never forget. I will keep, inside me forever.
So Charles paying tribute to his father, who, as you said, died when the year that he won the GP2 championship. That was emotional. It's still emotional now. And he said in those last laps, he thought a lot more about his father than he expected to. And I can imagine when you're driving Monaco, especially, there's no real pressure. You're not driving at the top of your game. You're just kind of managing and coasting round almost. You have that time to think. And not all those thoughts are potentially wanted, but they creep in.
Yeah, it's one of the sort of quirks of this circuit. I mean, there's so many quirks about the Monaco Grand Prix weekend, but I think that's one of them. You'd never imagine that a Formula One driver has any time to think of anything other than being utterly focused. But they were running around sort of 3, 4, 5 seconds off the pace at times today. So in terms of Formula One, that's like a sort of Sunday afternoon. I mean, it was a Sunday afternoon drive, but you know what I mean.
We should probably explain why that is, though, right?
Yeah.
Why they were running so slow and off the pace. And that was because under red flag conditions, you are allowed to change your tyres, essentially, for free. And that is what everyone did. If you were on the hard, you went to the medium. If you're on the medium, you went to the hard, or you stuck with what you got. Well, no, everyone changed and then tried to basically make it to the end of 78 laps without making a pit stop. There was a bit of jeopardy, especially with the medium tyre runners. Would they make it to the end? But essentially, like, everyone was coasting to make the tyres last.
Yeah, so basically what happened at the original start, in fact all the top 4 started on the hard tyre. That means you can go very long into the race. It kind of covers you in case of a safety car at any point. There were 3 cars notable in the top 10, which were the 2 Mercedes and Max Verstappen, who opted to go on the medium. Now, it's a faster starting tyre, so maybe you give yourself an opportunity. And, had the race played out normally without that big crash, maybe it could have worked for them. Unfortunately, that particular strategy fell apart when we got that big crash and the red flag, because exactly as you said, under that red flag period, they're allowed to change the tyres for free, which you have to, it's a no-brainer to do. And then, unfortunately, they have to start that next race on the medium tyre, which meant there's no way of them getting to the end of the race, which the hard tyres were able to do.
No, I know it's in the rules, but should that be looked at, the tyre change rule under a red flag? We've seen it before. We've seen it in Monaco a lot of times.
Yeah.
And it's led to some amazing race results. I think of Monza 2020, where Pierre Gasly won in the AlphaTauri, and that was because there was a...
Please don't say the fateful words of Abu Dhabi 21.
No, I won't say that one. That wasn't a red flag, at least. But Gasly won, and you had Sainz and Stroll on the podium as well, and that was because of a late red flag. Ironically, I think Charles Leclerc was the one who ended up in the wall, and Kevin Magnussen involved somewhere too. But as much as it can deliver some, I suppose, amazing results, it does it rob us a little bit of outright racing? And does it just... No one wants a race purely dictated by a tyre and a pit stop.
No, look, it's a feature of modern Formula One. I agree. I don't like the rule. And actually, I think, Formula One's in this phase now, under Liberty Media, where we're sort of experimenting with lots of things. We're trying different things, sprint races. So why not experiment with that idea as well? And maybe for certain races, like Monaco, where sometimes the biggest action happens in the pit lane through strategy and pit stops, why don't we mandate maybe 2 pit stops? We normally have 1. Maybe when we try, you have to use all 3 tyres, for example. In that kind of race.
I like it.
Why couldn't you come up with something like that? Maybe it's an experiment, see if it works. But we know that Monaco, on a day like today, with no pit stops in the most part, is relatively dull.
Tyre war. Bring that back.
Come on,
Bridgestone,
don't
Pirelli.
go. I mean, we said it was going to be exciting, this podcast. If you bring down the whole
I don't
tyre
want to get too tired, but
Gonna...
I think something needs to be done there. I'm not quite au fait with that rule.
Okay, let's move on to McLaren. I need to be a little bit quiet at the moment because some of Mark's former colleagues are around us, but they did really well.
I was going to say, I think we can be positive. Yeah.
I know, but they didn't win, and they will probably be disappointed with that because the chance was there. But they did the best they could, and actually, they did pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good day, I'd say. A pretty good weekend. coming off the back of actually a couple of good weekends. Since they introduced the major update package to that McLaren, they're really showing genuine pace. So I know it's a very specific weekend in Monaco, but actually that pace has been visible in the last few races on different circuit types. So I think they are a team that can look forward, thinking they're in a really strong position. And interestingly, it was Oscar Piastri this time, wasn't it? The lead car of the two McLarens. On Saturday in qualifying, we know how important it is. In qualifying, if you'd put his best sectors together from his various runs, he actually would have beaten Leclerc into pole position, so it was mighty close.
If this had happened on a different circuit, this is such a
where are you going with this?
Piastri would have won, I think, if it had been a sort of more traditional circuit rather than a street circuit where you can't overtake. Piastri's been flying all weekend long. So too is Leclerc. It would have been a great scrap. Yeah. We were robbed of that in Monaco. We just were. Sorry. Love Monaco and the glitz and the glams, but we were robbed of a wheel-to-wheel race between Leclerc and Piastri. Probably Sainz and Norris involved as well. McLaren, I'm so impressed every time they hit the racetrack. Since they applied this upgrade, they did the same last year. As soon as they put their full upgrade on in Austria last year, they catapulted as being the next best behind Red Bull and Ferrari. Red Bull and Max Verstappen, my apologies. And now Norris, obviously a race winner, Piastri playing the team game, only taking half the upgrade, then getting the full upgrade. They're playing well together as a team. Andrea Stella as the team principal running day-to-day operations. He is one of the best team principals in the paddock, in my opinion. He knows how to get the best out of everybody.
I mean, you have opened a can of worms, because if we sat here and played who is the best team principal in the paddock, there are a lot of options out there.
Andrea Stella's up there. Fred Vasseur is also great in what he's doing with Ferrari. But just to finish the McLaren point.
Sorry.
No. Well, I think I'm going to finish it. I wonder where I'm going to go next. But basically, they are on a massively brilliant trajectory, and I think both Norris and Piastri will be race winners again, and for the first time this year as well.
Couldn't agree more. I think I actually agree with the Andrea Stella point as well. I think speaking to people in the team, they love him. When everyone in your team loves the boss, that's a pretty good position to be in. I mean, it's actually quite rare, isn't it, that in any company in any part of the world that everybody within that company loves the boss. But I think at McLaren that's really the case right now, because he's transforming things, he's empowering people, he's utilising the strengths of every single man and woman in that organisation, which is great.
Funnily enough, when you say that, empowering people, that is what we can relate to Fred Vasseur at Ferrari. Both he and Andreas are empowering people, and it's seeing a sea change at both of those teams. So we say, they bought upgrades and they're closing that gap to them and Red Bull, but actually there's a whole other thing going on there, and it's fantastic to watch. It
really is, and I think Ferrari have desperately needed that for quite some time. Fred Vasseur is the guy I think that's making those changes and really changing the whole culture at Ferrari, which I think is going to be really important. And when you change the culture, you change the environment, the better upgrades start coming through. People start delivering better work, and that is how these things operate.
Well, we better hear from Oscar Piastri, who finished in P2.
Hey, Oscar. Well, congratulations on your best result of the season. You must be delighted or a little bit disappointed you didn't quite get to fight for that win.
I mean, obviously very happy with the podium. It's been a great weekend from start to finish, I feel like, and nice to finally get a result on the board. I feel like the last few weeks we've been very, very strong, just with no results to show. And today to finish second is a great result for everybody involved. So very happy with that. Tried my best to try and sneak past, but just, too difficult.
Is it particularly good that you've done it at a track like Monaco, such a tough one to do, and you had some damage on that car, so it could have all gone wrong, couldn't it, at the start?
Yeah, I mean, when I saw the floor after the red flag, I thought it was going to be a very, very long race. I think the pace at the beginning was so slow that it was helping me out a little bit, but then the last sort of 15-20 laps when we started to go, I didn't have an answer, and clearly Carlos and Lando were quicker behind, but I was pretty happy we were at Monaco at that point. So I think with the damage and everything considered, happy with P2.
Congratulations, Oscar. Thank you.
I feel like we spent a lot of time talking about Leclerc, Piastri, Sainz, Norris, those top four. We should probably hear from Carlos Sainz as well. He finished P3. I believe He was exceptionally lucky today. Do we all agree with that? Just because the restart helped him to get back in the race.
He got a get-out-of-jail-free card, but he played it very, very well once he was back in that race. So I don't want to take too much away from him.
Yeah, well, exactly that. He did get lucky, but it was a kind of blank restart because everybody was in the same positions as they started the initial start. But Sainz, once again, with that engineering brain he has, team player, throughout the race, constantly on the radio about what might happen if Norris goes on the soft. Charles is going to be exposed. I might be exposed. We need to always thinking of the team in that scenario, and that's what elevates him beyond perhaps his outright one-lap pace, is that he has that engineering mindset as well.
Well, let's hear from Carlos Sainz.
It was a bit of a relief. Sometimes you're unlucky, like there with that slight contact with Oscar. Sometimes you don't even get any puncture or anything in the car. And today I had a slight contact and I got the puncture and I was feeling gutted. And then suddenly the red flag that saved a bit my day. And from there onwards, really, like we expected. Pace was very strong in the race, but impossible to pass. I did everything I could to keep Lando under control, keep the safety car gaps, keep the pit stop gaps, and bring home a 1-3 for the team. That was the main priority.
I know it's been a bit of a difficult weekend for you. You haven't felt super comfortable and you've had a run of races. We haven't been on the podium. Is that good for the confidence, good kind of going forward now? Got something out of it?
I always felt like the race pace was going to be good. I was the fastest on Friday practice in terms of race pace, and I knew today with a long stint on the hards and my tire management I could be strong, but it's Monaco, you cannot pass. And even though I put Oscar a bit under pressure there at the end to try and force him into doing a mistake, he stayed strong and there was no way through.
As we speak, Carlos Sainz doesn't have a seat to go to next year. I mean, he might have done a deal without us. He doesn't always tell the media first, surprisingly. But with his engineering brain, his skill on track, all of the things that he has, to not have a seat, and there are rumours linking him to Audi. We haven't
literally
heard that
any
officially,
team would take him, probably.
He should be a man in demand, though, shouldn't he?
Yeah, he's a top driver. I think he's shown that over and over again. We know, or we think we know at least, he's got a pretty lucrative deal from Audi on the table if he wants it. It's there, but there's a clock ticking on it. We also know that he's talking to other teams as well, so we're not quite sure where he's going to end up, but he is going to be an asset to wherever he does land next year, and I think that's something that's testament to the way that he's delivered results over the last 18 months.
Russell held on for that P5 position. I mean, he didn't come in, he didn't pit. The medium tyres, we thought were going to just explode on him, but somehow he managed to hold on in front of Max Verstappen. And now the gap between Verstappen at the top of the championship and Charles Leclerc in second place is 31 points. Is that surmountable?
Absolutely. It's game on. It is game on. This has reinvigorated the championship. I'm actually a bit speechless. When somebody said it's only 31 points, I didn't believe them at first. I thought, no, he was miles ahead. What on earth has happened? Verstappen was hounding Russell at the end, but he had faster tyres, was always going to catch up to the back of him, probably not going to overtake him realistically. But this comes back to what we were saying at the start. A couple of races like that, at bumpy tracks, where a Red Bull feels not at ease. It's also game on in the Constructors' Championship as well, because Perez obviously coming away with absolutely 0 points. If Verstappen struggles, it's 10 times worse for Perez normally. So they've got one hand tied behind their back in that front when they're struggling.
Yeah, it's a DNF away from being mighty close, isn't it, for Verstappen? So, that can happen. We've seen it in the past. We've seen it already this year. So they're not infallible, Red Bull, and certainly not Verstappen. Although he's very, very good and we know what he can deliver, there's still plenty of opportunity for those around them.
Hamilton managed to finish P7, and then big shout-outs for the following members of the fraternity. Yuki Tsunoda, Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly finishing P8, 9 and 10, getting points on the board. And you have to take your hats off. When the opportunity arose, they went out there and they got those points, which are so valuable to their teams.
Absolutely. Tsunoda's on a roll at the moment. We talked about him a lot. He's doing all the right things. Can't fault him right now. Alex Albon, first points on the board for himself and Williams. They will be mightily important for them.
Do you know what I put that down to? I spoke to him on the grid.
Good luck charm.
Yeah, exactly.
Good luck charm. Yeah, he was very nice and polite, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Always is. Good
Always.
Good old Mr.
I
Alex
couldn't
Albon.
hear a word of what he was saying.
Oh, we heard it. It was
I
all very
assume
nice.
he was really polite.
He's a lovely chap, is Alex Albon. And then Pierre Gasly. I actually think Gasly, even though that's his first point all season long, and it's another point for Alpine, I actually think he's going to be really frustrated and disappointed in this race. Firstly, in qualifying, they thought Gasly could have got P8 on the grid with his qualifying lap in Q3, but he hit traffic. And then, of course, the two Alpines collided in the right-hander of Portier on lap 1 coming into the tunnel. And that's just rule number 1, isn't it?
I
Mark?
wish
You do
I
not
was
crash,
a-
especially those two who don't get on.
I wish I could be a fly on the wall in that debrief, man. That is...
I've heard Bruno Fairman is not a happy man right now.
No, and that is, that's going to be spiky, isn't it? Goodness me. It's your worst nightmare as a team. Having said that, everything you just said, I couldn't agree more with. Those drivers that finished out the top 10, deservedly so. They did the hard work on Saturday, and they capitalised on it today.
So, I want to know, as we round out this podcast, who's your driver of the day?
Charles Leclerc has to be. Managed the pace all race long and didn't have a single fault.
Yeah, it's difficult not to pick Charles Leclerc, such an emotional win as well. The only other one I'd give a special shout out to would be George Russell, who's F1's latest tyre whisperer.
Yeah.
72 laps on a medium, or 76 laps on a medium, whatever it was. Unbelievable.
Quite impressive, as you say. For me, it was Charles. He deserved this. He's waited so long for it to happen, and honestly, it was one of the more emotional wins that I've witnessed, as the horns sounded around the harbour and all the fans draping their Ferrari flags out of their flats. It was perfect for him. It was absolutely perfect. And that is all we have time for. So we will leave it perfectly now. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the team. Thank you to Harry or Gary. Which would you prefer?
Thanks, Benny. Ben's called me Gary on the coverage.
And Mark.
Thought I'd made an impact in my 1 year tenure here, but no.
Apparently not. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.